Hey everyone, it's Melissa from the blog hymnsandhome.com, and I have a bad blogger confession to make to you today. I never redecorated my entryway after Easter, so it still has carrots sitting in a bowl on my entryway table. And so I thought today we would take care of that together and go decorate my entryway for fall. Welcome to Hymns and Home. I'm Melissa, wife, mom, professional musician, and blogger at hymnsandhome.com. Join me as I share inspiration for modern cottage living and my love of all things homemade and thrifted. From decor and DIY to vintage, thrifting, cooking, and gardening, here you'll find the resources you need to create your very own modern cottage. Anytime I'm decorating an area for a fresh season, I like to start with a nice clean slate, and that included taking down this mirror garland from last spring. I became a little bit obsessed with making garlands for this mirror after I put one up last Christmas. I just loved the color and the texture that it added to this wall, and I actually ended up keeping it up through Valentine's Day, justifying that it was still red decor. And then made another one this past spring, which ended up staying all the way until now, and now I am making a new one for fall. So I finished wiping everything down, and then I started to bring out the pieces that I knew I wanted to incorporate, like this really cool vintage ice cream bucket that I found a few weeks ago at Vintage Market Days. I knew I wanted to put some sort of fall stems in it. It just has such a great rustic feel. And then also this really chunky knit pumpkin I found at Target. It has great texture. And I definitely always find a use for this little wooden vintage toolbox. Then I got to work on deciding what I wanted to use in my fall garland. So I started playing around with florals and kind of measuring to see what would look good. I always start with a base layer. That is the main frame of what's going to hold up the garland. So I start with some long stems, usually about 3 long stems that I will wire together as my base layer. Once I've figured out the placement of the stems, I will trim them to length, overlapping the stems a little bit, and then wire them together with floral wire. I decided to wire in 2 different types of picks, alternating them as I went down the length of the garland, and I've linked all of those sources below in the description of this video if you need sources. Even though it's definitely easier to work on a flat surface like the floor, it is very helpful to get the garland up there to see how it hangs and what changes you want to make. So I just wired it up there using floral wire and hanging it from my command hooks that I have around the edge of my mirror. And then I started to add in other flowers for extra volume and texture and color, just wherever I thought they would fit well. At this point, I called it a night and knew I would pick up the next morning with decorating. And like I said before, I love this little vintage toolbox. It is great for stacking and layering different things into your decor, like these little mini pumpkins from Trader Joe's and some pine cones from my parents' backyard. Anytime you can incorporate natural elements into your decor, it's just going to add so much. Now, terrariums are also a really fun thing to change out seasonally. I found this little one at Hobby Lobby a few years ago, and you can get so creative with layering different seasonal objects in there. For mine, I decided to put in some moss, which was super messy, but worth it. And then on top of the moss, I layered in some mini pumpkins of different sizes. Now, these are real pumpkins, but you could certainly use faux pumpkins as well. Fun fact, that little pumpkin on the bottom right grew in our garden this past summer, which was a surprise to us. We weren't planning on growing it, but it was super fun to discover. Finally, I added in a few folded vintage baby quilts that I found at thrift stores over the last year. This added more texture and height on which I could put my chunky knit pumpkin. To make this entryway seem warm and inviting for fall, I wanted to mix in a lot of different textures, like you have the moss and then the metal of the terrarium, wood and paper and natural elements like pumpkins and pine cones. Now we've got linens like quilts and a chunky knit pumpkin. So that just all comes together to add a warmth and a coziness and a depth to the decor. All right, well, I'm pretty pleased with how that turned out. I really love the garland around the mirror. I just love the texture that it ended up being, just all the different little bits of fall that are in that garland. So I'm really excited about that. I hope you love it too. But unfortunately, I did use up all of my florals on the garland and in the bucket on the bottom. So I have absolutely nothing left for a wreath for the front door, which I was going to do. So I have switched my plan to rummage around in my basement, see what I can find, and it'll just be a nice special challenge for me to come up with a simple fall wreath using only what I have because I already spent plenty on florals for the entryway. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and thank you so much for watching.